weigh-ins still to go, and of course fight night. This is Oscar Willis from the Mac Life. I am Mike Bohn. We're going to preview a little bit of this card for you here today. We'll start out with the main event. Obviously, Max Holloway returning to featherweight to defend against Frankie Edgar. This fight has been booked twice before. We are finally getting it. This is kind of the tagline from both guys. Third time's a charm coming into this one. Are you happy that we're finally getting this fight? It's been a rocky road. I mean, both these guys have had to fight different opponents on short notice. Didn't go Frankie Edgar's way, went Max Holloway's way against Jose Aldo. Is this a fight that you are looking forward to seeing on Saturday?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, when they announced it, I sort of, it's one of those things where they've booked it twice before, so you sort of wait, I'll believe it when they're in the cage. Yeah. But yesterday at the open workouts, I got the sense that, okay, it's here. Mm-hmm. And everything going well, they'll actually get in the cage and fight. And seeing them stare off against each other, I am excited to see it. I think these two are very beloved guys in the sport. They're exciting to watch, no matter, all their fights are good, good value MMA. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned, it feels like we're going to see it now. Yeah. We're getting very close, of course. Weigh-in days where things usually go.
We should go on record now and say it's definitely going to happen.
It's 100% going to happen, right in stone. Nevertheless, but we have been in the situation with Max Holloway before. Frankie Edgar is historically extremely reliable in these situations, but in terms of Max, we've seen things fall apart, closer to fights than we are right now. So there is always that door open for concern, but there's the whole issue of Max Holloway coming back down to featherweight. He's had issues making this weight. He's never stepped on the scale and actually missed weight, but being pulled very close to it. How do you think he looks this week coming back down to 145? Personally, I think he looks among the probably upper tier of how I've seen him going into fights at this weight class in terms of his health going into the fight.
Yes, but he does look, I think he looks as normal as I've seen him.
Sure.
In fact, today I thought he looked a little bit bigger than he usually does at this point in the week, but that might not be a good thing. That might mean he's got a lot of weight to lose in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
The thing with Max is very hard to talk to him about weight stuff because he doesn't really want to talk about it. He's just
keeps it very close to the vest.
Well, he's also just like, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. I'll be there. I'll be on point. So you kind of have to take him at his word. Like you said, he's never actually got on the scales and missed weight.
Yep.
So I think some people just wear it better than others, right? Some people get on the scale and they look pretty haggard, and Max is one of those guys who just doesn't wear it well, And so I think that makes us a bit more suspicious than perhaps we need to be. But the fact he was just at 155, it's kind of up in the air.
Yeah. Did you think it was kind of a no-brainer for him to come back and try to defend this title? I mean, obviously the Poirier fight at 155 for the interim belt in April came together pretty quickly, but I still think Max Holloway could be I know Dana White said after the fact, like, he was surprisingly small in my opinion for a lightweight, but that's because they gave him basically no time to move up and do that weight class. Like, I think you give him the proper adjustment period. He was a proper lightweight. So what do you think? Do you think this is kind of the division where you should be? Obviously the belt is kind of hard to walk away from when you have it there, but is this what you wanted to see from Max after that loss to Dustin Poirier?
If he'd beaten Dustin, then I think he should have vacated the featherweight title. I don't think
he'd be probably fighting Khabib right now.
That's what I mean. He shouldn't have, but I think he shouldn't have come back down. I don't think they should have necessarily done the whole double champ thing.
Yeah.
I think he should have vacated the featherweight because he lost to Dustin. Absolutely. What's interesting for Max is what happens after this fight, right?
Yeah.
Because Alex Volkanovski, who's actually in town,
yep.
Which, I mean, you can read into that what you will. That's the logical next guy, and I think it's pretty obvious the UFC would ideally like someone to come out of this fight relatively unscathed, regardless who it is, so they can send someone down to that Melbourne card. And I think that's the right thing to do. But after that, I think Max should probably, if Max beat Frankie, then beat Alex, and we're looking very far ahead here, then I think he should move up for good and drop the featherweight title.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And of course, that is looking a little bit into the future. Talking to both those guys today, though, about like the potential of doing that Melbourne fight, neither of them really seemed like super interested in it.
It's a long flight, Mike. It's a long flight.
Sure, it is a long flight, and it's not that far away from now either. So that's also something to play into it. But talking about the actual fight itself between Frankie and Max, I mean, Max, I think I'm seeing unanimously, I don't see many people giving Frankie Edgar a chance in this fight. And I mean, that's, I guess, the story of his entire career. So it's like, it's not like it's a majorly different narrative for him. But still, I think in this one, it seems like it's a pretty uphill climb against Max Holloway. He's just looked so good fighting at 145. His last fight there, he broke all sorts of records against Brian Ortega. Just ridiculous output. I think it's like 290 significant strikes in the course of the fight or something. So in your mind, what do you think Frankie Edgar has to do to give himself a chance in this matchup?
I mean, if you're Frankie, you I would probably take a little bit of solace in that he just lost, right? And that was the first time in that last fight we actually saw Max hurt. I really like rocked a few times. So if I was Frankie, I'd probably be thinking, he might not be fully back there, or that'll be in his mind. Maybe he won't be so aggressive. I think he will be as aggressive as he is. But if you're Frankie, maybe that's thing. But I think realistically, Frankie's as old as he is. He's in the twilight of his career. I think this is probably his last shot at the belt. We were saying earlier, that I think that loss to Brian Ortega was something of a turning point for Frankie. I think that's sort of the signal that maybe his time as a top tier fighter was coming to an end. So I think if Max and Frankie had happened maybe 3 years ago, then you could look at really competitively. Maybe the wrestling of Frankie could get him and stuff like that. But frankly, I think Frankie is up against it. And I really think if you thought, well, maybe, it's so hard, because you could say, well, maybe Frankie is the sort of guy who could soak up damage for 3 rounds and then fire back in the 4th and 5th.
Sure.
Problem is, Holloway's there for 4 rounds.
That's where he does his best work.
He's there around 4 and 5. Yeah. So, anything can happen in MMA, but realistically, it's quite hard to see where, because it's the size difference as well. Yeah, it's quite hard to see where Frankie finds success, I think.
Yeah, it's a really tough matchup for him. The only thing that really gives me, piques my interest in terms of Frankie is we haven't seen Max fight a guy with wrestling as good as Frankie and really try to use it where that's one of their main weapons. So Max has shown tremendous takedown defense, but you go back to the Dennis Bermudez fight, which is so long ago, which he lost, but I personally don't think he lost that one. It was extremely close on the scorecard. I think a split decision. So, but we still haven't really seen someone come in and challenge Max with those weapons. So who knows, maybe there's something to be exposed there. From what I've seen, I don't really think that's the case, but you never know.
Well, I think if, again, you look at the size difference and you think, man, I think it's a tough ask for Frankie to really take him down, especially with the takedown defense we've seen Max show. But if Frankie got the knee tap and took him down the round one and managed to keep him down for 3 minutes, suddenly you'd be looking at the rest of the fight what could happen here, So it's good, but I don't know what Frankie can really do here to find a route to victory.
Yeah, I do think it's pretty compelling in that sense. I think we'll know pretty early on which direction this fight's going to sway. And we talked a little bit about what comes next, but I think we could unanimously agree this is probably Frankie Edgar's last shot at a UFC title. Maybe the door could be open if he drops down to 135. Who knows? Maybe he tries to pull the trigger, but at that point, I almost wonder if maybe it's too late to make that move. I would have liked to see it a few years ago, maybe after the first or second Aldo loss. But nevertheless, Max Holloway, I think too, assuming maybe he does defend his title here, there's lots of doors that I think open up potential return to 155. That Volkanovski fight is there, so there is options I think coming there. But I do think right now this was the right fight to make. I know was some discussion, does Frankie Edgar deserve this, all that stuff. I think all things considered, it was the fight to book. So we will see what happens on Saturday with that featherweight title fight. Another featherweight fight in the co-main event, but on the women's side in that weight class. To me, Cris Cyborg got to be the number one storyline going into this fight card on Saturday. Just so much going on with her. It's absolutely crazy. It seemed like things were maybe cooled down a little bit. Then Dana White came out on Wednesday and did a media scrum in Las Vegas. Our John Morgan was there, and he kind of laid it back down on the table when he came to Cris Cyborg. He was as firm as ever that this woman does not want to run it back with Amanda Nunes, saying all sorts of things. Of course, the fact that she will be a free agent after this fight, the final one on her UFC deal, plays massively into this whole scenario. But Dana even says, I'll sign her to a one-fight deal to do that, which of course, as we all know, isn't really a one-fight deal because of the Champions Clause, but that's still something interesting to do because Cyborg does win and the Champions Clause extends her deal. We're getting way ahead here, but you still have a disgruntled champion. I don't think it makes it that much easier
as well. You have a third fight.
Yeah, exactly. And making that happen is probably not going to be easy, but you saw Cris Cyborg today. I saw her at Media Day. We both spoke to her. I think we both got a slightly different vibes from her. She was fairly open with me, but nevertheless...
I got her after you, so she'd given all the answers and then didn't answer
then she kind of shut it out. But what kind of vibe did you get from her? Does this seem like someone, she didn't do an open workout. She didn't answer questions to the media at open workout. I don't know if there was some confusion there, mostly just interacted with the fans. But are you getting the vibes that this is Cris Cyborg's final UFC fight week?
I actually do believe it probably will be. Yeah. Funny enough, I predicted after she lost to Amanda, knowing that her contract was up this year, that they wouldn't re-sign her. Yeah. I think they probably would be open to, but it's very rare in MMA that when we see these fighters going in on the last fight of their contract, usually they're trying to gamble on themselves. They're trying to make a bet like, if I win, I can command more money.
Yep.
With Cyborg, it feels like there's a major swing here. Mm-hmm. If she wins, she's a very valuable commodity. That rematch with Amanda,
100%.
If she comes out and starches Felicia, that's a very valuable rematch to watch. You want to see that. So they're going to have to pay her the same or a bit more to keep her around. If she loses, I don't think it's outrageous to say that the UFC would be too sad in saying, well, she didn't want to fight Amanda. We tried to keep her around, lowballing her, and she could find a home somewhere else. And I don't think she'll lose, but I do believe, and I tried to speak to Cris about this today, but she, after you exhausted her, she's very much like, listen, I'll fight on Saturday and you'll hear all about it after Saturday. Like, after Saturday,
she did say tune into that post-fight press conference.
She was like, I'll answer all your questions then. So we'll probably get more of an idea of what she's thinking after that. But I do believe that fundamentally the issue between Cyborg and the UFC has been throughout their entire time together. Cyborg has an opinion of her status as a brand and as an athlete and sort of a commodity, and Dana White and the UFC have a very different idea of what that brand level is.
Sure.
And I think the issue is they have to work together, but they start off from very two stubborn points, essentially, and they're not very easy to come together.
Yeah, it is a bit of a struggle. Yeah, you did mention, she is fighting Felicia Spencer on this card. We should maybe bring that up. A fellow Canadian, an undefeated fighter who comes in, another former Invicta FC champion. Before we get to her, though, little more on Cyborg. You mentioned that you do feel this could be her last UFC fight. Where do you see her landing most likely? I think a lot of people in their mind, they're like, the Scott Coker connection, going back to Strikeforce, that's where she'll go. But I think there's also the option of PFL. A lot of people want to see that Kayla Harrison fight at some point. Who knows, even Ryzen, one championship. I think she has a lot of doors open. I think a lot of people will be trying to get her services, but I think a lot of it has to do with the win here, which I think majority of us feel Cris Cyborg's going to win this fight. I think it'd be a pretty big upset if Felicia Spencer came in there and got the job done on Saturday. We'll get to the actual matchup itself, but just thinking about it on the surface, where do you think she'll land, and where would you like to see her land?
Well, certainly if Spencer won, Cyborg's appeal there.
Well, that changes the entire game completely. This conversation completely flips on its head. I really don't know what would happen there. It'd be very, very interesting. But let's just assume she wins.
Spencer,
of course.
I think, like I said, the Bellator thing I think would probably be most likely, because I think Scott's never been shy of his praise for Cyborg, and I think they probably feel that the featherweight division the UFC's tried to do is not really kicked off, and they think they could probably get that market. So if I was Bellator, I'd certainly go for her. I think One and Ryzen, everyone could sort of make those sort of like, she can go over there and almost like a Gabby Garcia, just have these kind of weird, quirky matches, to put it nicely. I don't think she'll go there. I think she's still got a few. She's only had one loss in however many, 14 years.
14 years, I
still think she's a competitor. I don't think she wants to just get paid at this point. I still think she has a legacy she wants to cement, even though she's already got legacy. So I think Bellator would be the most likely. The outside, she said she wants to go to boxing. She's been pretty open that she wants to go to boxing. And
Zuffa boxing.
We solved it. No, but she said she wants to go to boxing. She said that after her contract, she'd look at boxing and stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if maybe she has an angle there. But then again, women's boxing, although it's come on leaps and bounds, it's not like there's an abundance of people for her to box there. It's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds. And let's give Felicia Spencer her respect and, talk about her a little bit. Massive opportunity, just one fight in. She came in and she did great against Megan Anderson, got that win, and now it sets her up for this title fight, or this potential title eliminator, rather, against Cyborg. Watching her at open workouts, I think a lot of people were technically inspired about her ability to win this fight on the feet. Particularly, we didn't really see any of her grappling, and that's where she is strongest, where she's had the majority of her wins, and we haven't really seen someone put Cyborg on the ground with her talent there. So who knows, she gets a takedown early when they're not too sweaty or anything could happen there, in my opinion. But do you see an avenue to victory for Felicia Spencer on Saturday? Well, one thing I will say for Spencer is that if you wanted to tell a fighter this is the attitude you need to have going into a fight like this, she's absolutely got
100%.
it. She's relishing. She's not even relishing. She's not even getting carried away. She's just like, it's pretty cool. And she's looking forward to fighting Cyborg. And she said, if I win and I get to fight Amanda right after, that's going to be awesome too. Not super common words to come out of people's mouths. So she has the correct mindset and the hungry sort of, I'm getting to fight a legend here.
Yeah.
So I like that about her. Skill wise, the thing about Cyborg is, so she's coming off a loss, and we know what a loss does to you. It makes you forget real quick how good people can be. But if you really look at that loss Cyborg did, and not to take attention away from Spencer, Cyborg lost to Nunes because she got hit very hard and thought, well, I'll hit her harder, and that didn't work out for her. But if we look back at her other fights, like against Holly Holm, she's a very sort of technical boxer, and she outboxed Holly over 5 rounds. So I actually think Cyborg is a better fighter than she showed in her loss. I mean, obviously, but she's still a monster. Do you know what I mean? She lost to Amanda, which there's no shame in. So there's a lot to overcome. We're talking about Frankie and Max. I think it's a bit steeper here, steeper hill here. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think if you're Felicia Spencer, you basically just have to go like balls to the walls at the beginning. There is questions around Cyborg, like how does she respond if she gets hit hard again? Does like that overdrive, just brawling mentality come out? But
Felicia said she doesn't like to brawl.
She doesn't. But I still think if you're fighting Cyborg, going out there and just circling the cage and like maybe just hoping she overcommits on a punch that you can dive on a leg for a takedown. Like I don't know how effective that strategy is. I think if we see Amanda Nunes fight Cyborg again, like she's going to come out and try to do something pretty similar and tag her early, because I think it's either there's not really much of it in between. Maybe get her early or like hope she tires out towards. And this is a 3-round fight. We haven't seen Cris Cyborg in a 3-round fight for some time. So she is not really going to have that fear of like, maybe I'll gas out if this goes into the championship round. She very much can use all her steam early if need be. And I think that is a very, very scary proposition if you're Felicia Spencer. So we will see what happens. I mean, like I said, I think if Cyborg wins, that post-fight press conference is going to be must-watch material. Hopefully, the UFC lets her attend, given what she was saying today. It's going to be Dana White's birthday on Sunday when we're probably at that press conference. So maybe she'll present a nice gift to him and they'll just make up at the press conference. But I'm not counting on it. Nevertheless, I mean, we've kind of covered the main topics on this card. Right. We won't hide from it. This is not the UFC's best pay-per-view offering of the year or even close to it. It's a pretty rough card once you get beyond the top 2 fights, but there is some interesting little nuggets on there. I mean, I think the excitement for Jeff Neal and Nico Price when that fight was reported was genuine enthusiasm from the MMA community, and I think that's a really interesting welterweight fight. I mean, I've heard, and admittedly it comes from a lot of people on Jeff Neal's side, but man, like I haven't heard this many positive words about like a rising guy at 170 in a long time for him. So like people are saying they feel he's the best striker in the UFC.
Wow.
Some of the people around him, and those are obviously incredibly lofty, statements to be making about a guy like that who's only 3-0 in the UFC. So I'm really interested in that fight. I mean, how they mesh with Nico Price, that's a really exciting style.
And I like his attitude. I like Nico's attitude.
Yeah.
He's just like, I can't. He's sitting there thinking, I can't wait to fight him. I'm talking about him so much.
Yeah.
So
he's like shaking and stuff. Yeah. That just seems like it's got fight of the night material written all over it. Anyone else that kind of stands out? I mean, I can mention a few of the prelim guys after that I had the chance to speak with on Wednesday, but in terms of that main card, there's not much meat on the bone outside of that Neal Price fight. There is Olivier Aubin-Mercier trying to come back from his first 2-fight losing skid against the guy named Armin. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because it's pretty difficult. But the Russian guy who we saw give a good fight on short notice to Islam Makhachev earlier this year, who's obviously one of the most highly touted lightweights out there. So any meat on the bone here for this main card outside of the top 2?
Well, look, I mean, like you said, we can't shy away from it. It's not a stellar on paper, but then often these fight cards.
Okay, usually... Dana White. But I get what you're saying.
It's not quite gone. I still have some left. So
it might be the opposite. Last week we had everyone. The San Antonio card's a sleeper, and then we get 9 straight decisions to start the card. So who knows what's going to show up?
But so what I was going to say is I don't necessarily think there's fights that I'm looking forward to, but there's fighters that I'm looking forward to. Yep. So like you said, Olivier, he's always a bit of a character. He came wearing a bit of a man purse today, which is a brave decision. Even
and said something pretty interesting to our friend Aaron Bronstetter at TSN. The fact that he actually enlisted basically an odds maker, a handicapper, an MMA handicapper, to come into his camp and do research on his opponent for this fight, and he said he got like 5 pages of notes back, like something so thorough, things that his coaches, his teammates, people who were helping him prepare for this fight didn't even come across their radar. So that's kind of an interesting little nugget there that Aaron got. But yeah, I think Olivier is kind of a interesting guy.
I always like watching him fight because he's a bit quirky as a dude, and then Hakeem Dawodu as well. He's exciting guy, he's coming back
from an injury too.
Because we saw him backstage at Philadelphia,
Ottawa, UFC Ottawa,
also Canada. But yeah, so I remember him being back and very excited and very sort of intense, like he wants to get back in there. So I'm excited to see him back as well. He's an exciting guy.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, the one that's really exciting is Eric Koch, to see him back. You know, kind of a little backstory with Eric Koch. This is one of the first guys I ever interviewed as an MMA reporter. I used to do a column called My First Defeat, where you would talk to like certain fighters about the first time
just
they lost.
Cheerful, Mike.
Yeah, I know. And just like Mr. Positivity over here. But he actually, you know, some of them, that stuff is really hard to pull out of some fighters. They're extremely reluctant to talk about. He was so open at the time, and I thought that was like one of the things that kind of helped me see these fighters and get to know them a little better coming up. And then obviously, you know, this is a guy in this province in, I believe, 2012 was supposed to be fighting for the belt that's headlining this card. He's supposed to be fighting Jose Aldo for the featherweight title, and then things more or less went haywire for Eric Koch. So many injuries. He has 3 fights in the past 5 years since 2014. He had moved up to lightweight and lost 2 in a row. Now he's fighting at welterweight for this card, moving up there against Kyle Stewart, who's just an 0-1 guy in the UFC, another Canadian. But he was a person coming into this week. I'm like, I want to talk to this guy. So I scheduled the early interview with him. And man, it was more than I could have expected. I mean, this is basically the 1-year anniversary. It's kind of weird to call it anniversary because that seems like a positive kind of word, but of his father's death, which he said was extremely unexpected. But man, like the maturity on this guy, like he basically said, he feels when you lose someone so close to you like that, it's like the final step in maturing in life. And he feels he's grown more in this past year that he hasn't fought than he has in the previous 29 in his life. So just to see a guy that at one point was so highly touted, so much talent, you know, trains out of Rufus Sport. And it seems like moving up to welterweight, his confidence is right there. He is in the gym with Woodley, with Askren, with Pettis, with Bilal Muhammad, with like all these guys that are legit welterweights. So that to me is a really fascinating comeback story for him.
If you're training alongside the ex-welterweight champion now and Ben Askren, who despite the recent losses, who he is, you would have to feel pretty confident to move up to that division.
100%.
Do you know what I mean? So yeah, you're right. That is interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, outside of that, there's a couple other names sprinkled on here. You know, we got Alexis Davis, a 4 title challenger in her own right. Julian Robertson, who's a pretty interesting up-and-coming flyweight. But yeah, I think outside of that, there's not a ton of meat on the bone here. So, you know, that's what you get here in Edmonton. It's not the greatest pay-per-view offering in the world. They kind of got a little struck last time too, when we lost the Demetrius Johnson Ray Borg fight on like one night's notice. So they haven't exactly brought the heat here in Edmonton, but you know, that's what you get sometimes.
But we have.
Exactly. And I mean, if you think about it, this card pay-per-view was also slid in there. This is basically the makeup card for the January UFC 233 that never came to fruition. So they kind of just crammed this one in here. And
listen,
we got Canada's own Max Holloway on the card, at least. He is the saving
with
grace
for the
Canadian.
Toronto Raptors hat.
There you go.
But I think, listen, it's not the best card, but Holloway, Edgar's fun time, whatever you look at it.
Exactly. No, those top 2 are money. I think, you know, if you're a true MMA fan, this is probably, you're going to throw down that on your Saturday night. I think Max Holloway is, you know, one of the most must-watch fighters in the entire sport. So looking forward to seeing him back. Really appreciate you guys joining us as we had a little discourse on this UFC 240 card, and just keep it locked to MMAJunkie.com for coverage all week long, and maybe the Mac Life if you want some leftovers. So
how dare you.
Really appreciate it, guys, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.